Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'm here with a replay of a featured match from a friendly league. I'm not going to upload this whole league, but this particular match was really exciting and I thought you guys would enjoy it. So here it is for your entertainment. I won the die roll, so let's have a look at the opening hand. Well, this is a beautiful, well-rounded hand. We've got creatures, turn 1 AEther Vial, Spell Pierce. So if the opponent's deck is playing a lot of non-creature spells, we're going to be well set off with Spell Pierce. So I'll keep this. It's not the most powerful Merfolk hand. If we had one more creature instead of this third land, it'd be substantially better. We can't really complain. Opponent mulliganed to 6. And kept there. If I recall, they put the scry on the bottom. Seems like we're off to a good start. Island AEther Vial, excellent turn 1, pass it to the opponent. Urza's Tower means Tron, unfortunately. We don't have any Spreading Seas, but this Spell Pierce might come in handy. We're happy to see Chromatic Sphere instead of Expedition Map. Take the AEther Vial up, and now Trickster is pretty solid because we can now play our land, and if the opponent just passes back to us, we can get a threat on the board by flashing in Trickster. Opponent cycles Chromatic Sphere, plays a second Tron piece, and now has green colorless, which usually means Sylvan Scrying. So despite mulliganing to 6, they're looking for turn 3 Tron. Fortunately, we have the Spell Pierce up. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. Showing what I consider the correct way to use Spell Pierce is just if you have the mana up, you gotta snap it off. If we let Sylvan Scrying resolve and they get Tron online, they can very easily play a Walking Ballista or a Wormcoil Engine that Spell Pierce can do nothing against. So I went to the trouble of leaving the mana up. They played a spell that would have furthered their game plan, and I countered it. So don't be precious with your Spell Pierces. Get to take AEther Vial up here, and as things look, we're probably just going to pass the turn again. That was an excellent rip, because that means we can go Trickster and Spell Pierce and Master here. So, Rising Canopy is an interesting inclusion. I wonder if that's becoming sort of the norm in Green Tron these days. I mean, it's an excellent card. Anything that has the text draw a card on it is usually pretty good. Okay, so mulligan to 6, and the opponent has redundant ways to get early Tron established. We are going to Spell Pierce this again. And because they mulliganed, and because we've done a good job keeping them off of Tron, it's definitely time to just slam our creatures. So let's get this Trickster down, let's get Master down, and swing for at least 5 next turn. I'm going to take AEther Vial up here because we've got lands, and we want to be able to deploy this Master of Waves no matter what, as quickly as possible. Occasionally, when you're empty-handed, you'll want to leave AEther Vial on too, because if you draw Silvergill, you'll have no Merfolk to reveal, and you want to be able to get that Silvergill in and draw you a card. In this case, if we draw a Silvergill, we can cast it with our mana, reveal Master of Waves, and AEther Vial will be on 3, continuing to move up to 4. So we can get this Master of Waves into play. And now we have a second Master of Waves, further validating the decision to tick it up. Let's go ahead and get in for 5 here. Yeah, we're just hoping the opponent can stay off Tron for a little bit. So looks like they played another tower, an Oblivion Stone. This has been a really, really good mulligan to 6 for the opponent. Now, Oblivion Stone, and they scryed to the bottom. So Oblivion Stone, out of all the things that Tron can throw at us, this one might be the most annoying to deal with, because we often develop a board where AEther Vial is doing tons of work. And if the opponent cracks Oblivion Stone, not only does it just destroy the AEther Vial, it just negates that particular chance to activate, because if we activate, the creature that comes into play will get wiped away by Oblivion Stone as well. So it's really, really good against AEther Vial. Okay, so there's one of those Silvergills I was talking about. Now, despite Oblivion Stone on the board, we would like to draw into something like a Spell Pierce. So I think I'll probably run this Silvergill Adept out, since it replaces itself anyway. Okay, we get to get in cleanly for 5 there, and as I was saying, let's go ahead and cast this Silvergill Adept now. All right, we just drew another 2-drop. So once the opponent deals with our board, it might be a little tricky rebuilding. We'll have to see how it goes. So we're hoping that they whiff on lands now because it takes 5 for them to actually wipe the board away. Oh, God. Though not only do they have a land, but they have the exact land they need to turn on Tron. So now they have access to 11 mana, I believe. All right, so as I was saying, Aether Vial is now useless. I'll leave it on 4. Mutavault is good because I can cast a Master of Waves, and I'll have a Mutavault that's getting buffed by the Master of Waves to hopefully close out this game. Against Oblivion Stone, you often just want to go straight to combat and see if you can force the opponent to crack the stone during your combat step. Occasionally, they won't crack the Oblivion Stone during combat if it won't kill them, because if they do crack it during combat and we go to our second main, we can often just play a Spreading Seas and take them off of their big mana. But this is a pretty big attack, so I have a feeling the opponent is going to destroy all of our stuff. Very sad to see the Aether Vial go, but I'm going to go ahead and jam this Master of Waves. They have a lot of things in their deck that can deal with Master of Waves. If they play a Karn, they just exile him. If they play Walking Ballista, that's ridiculous because it can just kill him with 1 ping. I'm sure I'm forgetting other things, but... Oh, Ugin, of course, can just bolt the Master of Waves. Ulamog is another answer. So the opponent's going to exile Master of Waves and Mutavault. It's not time to scoop just yet. We do have the opponent at 9. Oh, of course, the opponent has a Ghost Quarter too in case we draw Mutavault or something. So, Expedition Map. Alright, so it's 2-drop and Vial. There are lines, I think, that might get us there. We can take 2 attacks from this guy because we have 46 cards in our library. Let's say they have Absolute Air in their hand right now, and next turn they attack for 10. We take it. We draw a land. We play a Master of Waves. Now we've got a ton of power on the board. We crack at them for 2. They go down to 7. If they swing with Ulamog again, we can chump with one of our tokens. And at that point, we would still have lethal on the board with 2 tokens left for 4 power. He'd be at 7, and then 2 more Merfolks. So there are lines that win. So I don't like to scoop too early. Okay, Chromatic Star. Hopefully that's, the extent of what the opponent has in hand. Okay, going to attacks. Opponent's going to exile 20 of my cards. Play a land, and with 2 cards left in hand... this was pretty funny, because the opponent paused for like 5 seconds, and I was just thinking, I bet they have another Ulamog in hand. I bet you that's like the only thing they would think about. If they had anything else, they would just jam it. So they thought about it. And they were like, yeah, that's pretty good, playing another 10-drop that exiles my opponent's lands and creatures. So, got absolutely crushed by Tron in Game 1, despite having a really solid hand, despite countering 2 Sylvan Scryings. Let's see. What would Spell Pierce have potentially done if I didn't use it to counter Sylvan Scrying? Well, the opponent would have gone for an Oblivion Stone, but at that point, if I didn't counter the Scrying, they would have had Tron mana. So Oblivion Stone would not... Spell Pierce would not have been able to stop the Oblivion Stone. Spell Pierce would certainly not have been able to stop Ulamog. Even if it could counter creatures, Ulamog's cast trigger would still exile my stuff. So definitely was correct to use Spell Pierces to counter the Sylvan Scryings early in the game. The opponent just had really great access to their land searching effects, and yeah, they got Tron online pretty quick and wrecked me. So that was Game 1, unfortunately. Lost that one. We're going to go ahead to Game 2 and see how that one went. All right, I'm back for Game 2. I'll be on the play again. I'd like to see Aether Vial, but this is a pretty solid hand. Trickster can be really good against Wormcoil. Gains us turns by preventing it from attacking, preventing it from gaining life. Venser is a nice versatile bounce effect if we can draw some more lands, and of course Spreading Seas is excellent. Creatures, Spreading Seas, can't ask for more. Opponent actually mulligans to 5 here. And again, if I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure that they scryed to the bottom. Play an island and pass. Mine and Sphere. Again, dodging the turn 1 map. So the hand getting a little bit better by drawing Deprive, but we really want to draw lands here, getting a little bit backed up. So it's tempting to play out Spreading Seas now, but since we're on the front foot this game, and the opponent has mulligan to 5, we really want to establish a clock. So it's correct to go ahead and run out Silvergill here. I chose to reveal Reejerey because if I don't draw another land and I pass the turn, it's going to appear potentially that I passed the turn because I don't have a third land, and the opponent will be less likely to put me on a counterspell. I'm not sure if that's totally clear, but next turn, if I don't draw a land, I'm just going to ship it back to the opponent, and they might think, great, he can't play his 3-drop, and they just slam whatever they have, and it'll just run into a counterspell. So a bit of strategy involved in choosing to reveal Reejerey there. Okay, so let's continue. Another Deprive, is nothing to shake a stick at. Okay, so this is exactly what happened in game 1. They have 2 Tron pieces on the first 2 turns, and they get to resolve Sylvan Scrying, of course, getting a tower. So when you guys have cards revealed to you, you should always open up this revealed cards tab here. And as the opponent plays those cards, you should dismiss those cards. It's similar to writing it down in person when you play in paper. So since they have the tower and they can play any number of big spells next turn, I have to hold up Deprive. Fortunately, I have a Trickster in case they happen to pass through for some reason. I can get a creature on board with Trickster. So let's go ahead and attack with Silvergill. Opponent plays the tower. I get to dismiss that card. And let's see what the opponent has. So they go for Karn, and a pretty easy choice just to deprive this. Unfortunately, only on 2 lands here. We get to get in with Silvergill, and then we can just replay our land and pass the turn again. Okay, Chromatic Sphere, totally fine. Not going to deprive that. But here they go for O-Stone, and I mentioned last game how annoying this card can be against us, so I do use the Deprive on the Oblivion Stone. Okay, opponent follows up with the Thragtusk, so they've got pretty good stuff this game. They mulligan to 5. How does the opponent have Redundant Tron, Oblivion Stone, Karn, and Thragtusk? It's like they don't have enough cards to do that. It should be impossible. Tron is so ridiculous. And I'm sitting here stuck on 2 lands. Well, there's a 3rd land. Hopefully I don't have to pick that one up anytime soon. I can't really do anything here except pass the turn, I don't think. Oh, wait, nope. I have a Spreading Seas in hand, so of course we want to get that on their Tron. So, Mutavault's not bad. We do want to get to 4 lands for Venser, so the hand is looking good. We've just got to sort of weather the storm here. Beats from Thragtusk are never really that threatening. Like, we can take them as long as we're higher than 5 life. What is he doing here? A second Oblivion Stone. That's kind of ridiculous. Okay, so what are we doing here? Obviously going to attack with Silvergill. The opponent, after gaining all that life with Thragtusk, is back up to 21. That was something I forgot to mention. So that's a little bit annoying. Now, important to point out that whenever Thragtusk leaves the battlefield, it gets a beast token. It's not like when he dies. So there are some creatures that have triggers for when they die. So things like Venser, bouncing them is fine because they're not dying. They're just getting bounced. But when Thragtusk leaves the battlefield, he makes a token. So we really don't want to bounce Venser. The opponent, if you notice, passed last turn without playing a land. So they currently don't have mana to crack Oblivion Stone, and we can hopefully ride that to victory if we can just dodge land drops. So let's see. I think the play here is Mutavault, Vial, and leave up mana for Trickster. No. Actually, I guess I played Reejerey here because, and that makes a lot of sense actually. We get to get in for 3 here, but that's not really the biggest benefit. It was a clever play, and I didn't really remember what my line there was, but seeing it again there brings it back. Now, if the opponent doesn't have another land drop next turn, we get to go sort of crazy and play a bunch of lords and take a huge chunk of their life total. If we think about just the attack next turn with double buffs, it would be 5, 5, and 4, that's 14. And we put the opponent pretty close to just cleaning them up with a Mutavault, even if they wipe the board. So that seemed really appealing, getting the power of Reejerey down onto the table. We don't know if the opponent has a 5th land yet, so they just go straight to combat with Thragtusk. Again, choosing not to block. There's a 5th land, unfortunately. So, okay, we draw another land. So Venser could come into play here. They don't have Tron online, so they just have 5 mana. So if they don't crack the Oblivion Stone right now, we can bounce it. Like, say they try to put a Fate counter on Thragtusk or something. So we're just going to go straight to combat and get in. Now, they could crack their Oblivion Stone and just kill our creatures, which would be, I guess, good for them. They'd get a 3/3 for Thragtusk, but I could follow up with development, play a Lord, I don't know, leave up Venser, whatever. But they take the damage, and then I'm going to play my island and pass. Now, the opponent doesn't have to crack this here. So what are they doing? So they go to put a counter on Thragtusk, which is amazing for us because now we can just bounce the Oblivion Stone. And as long as they don't get a tower next turn, they're not going to have enough mana to both play and crack Oblivion Stone next turn. And having taken this hit this turn, they're well within lethal for the double Lord play next turn. Interesting to note that this line would have been good with Echoing Truth as well, if we're comparing Venser to Echoing Truth. In the case of Echoing Truth, we actually could have used Island Mutavault and then still left up mana for Trickster on the opponent's turn. Okay, so it looks like they're just running out that Oblivion Stone again. And they choose to leave Thragtusk back. Can't say I blame them. I'm in a pretty good spot right now. Drew another land. Not that amazing, but as I mentioned, they're well within lethal for the double Lord. So play 1 Lord, untap a land. Play another Lord. Don't really have to tap anything here. So I chose to untap a land. I'm not going to play this Trickster anyway. Activate the Mutavault and swing for 14. Opponent just scooped at that point. Possible that I should have tapped down the Thragtusk instead of untapping my land. It was just kind of useless to untap the land. But yeah, the opponent didn't have mana up to activate Oblivion Stone, so we knew that we had a clean Island Walk attack. And, you know, the opponent mulliganed to 5 there and had a really, really strong... Okay, we're back for game 3 against Mono Green Tron. The opponent will be on the play this time, hoping for a good opener. And yeah, this is serviceable. 2 Spreading Seas, pretty decent. Opponent mulligans again, and if I recall, again, they went to the bottom. So hoping for a weak hand out of the Tron deck. Okay, here's finally the turn 1 expedition map with a Tron piece. Great start from the opponent. More gas for me, but without an Aether Vial, it's going to be kind of slow development. Play an island and pass. Fortunately, they didn't have a second Tron piece. They just have a redundant power plant. They can still activate their expedition map, though, but we get a tiny bit of breathing room. A second Mutavault is decent. Mutavaults are great in the matchup because they dodge a lot of the sorcery speed effects. I mean, like if if they play an Ugin and they want to bolt something, they can't reach the Mutavault. So Mutavaults are great if the opponent plays an Ugin or Oblivion Stone can't deal with Mutavault. So I'm not unhappy to see these guys. But again, pretty slow without access to Vial. Since they're not threatening Tron next turn, I can take this turn off and, well, off, I don't know. I can be offensive this turn, is what I mean to say. To sort of establish a bit of front-footedness, try to pressure the opponent a bit. You can see that they drew this versus mine. Play a Chromatic Sphere. Filter for green. Play that mine. You go ahead and dismiss that. Okay, I had a feeling what was coming. Again, despite mulliganing, very quick access to Tron. Now with the tower in hand. All right, so go ahead and play one of those Mutavaults and just throw the Spreading Seas on the Mine. Another Trickster. Those guys can be handy if the opponent plays Worm Coils. They're also just handy for end-stepping pressure. All right, another Chromatic Star. Plays the tower, so just miss that over here. And an Oblivion Stone, showing how valuable Spell Pierce can be in the matchup. It would be really incredible if I could Spell Pierce this right now. Unfortunately, I can't. Fortunately, the opponent is just on 4 lands, so they might not be able to crack the Oblivion Stone yet. We've got a lot of options here. I'm going to take a sip of my water while I think through them a little bit. Now, the opponent has pretty uniformly showed that he wants to crack Oblivion Stone during my turn. So, what does that mean for how I play out, like Tricksters versus Silvergills, that kind of thing? I just played out, I believe, a second Mutavault, so I can't attack with one of them. I have a choice of either playing like a Silvergill and then attacking with one of the Mutavaults for 5. That seems like a good option. A really bad option would be playing out our Spreading Seas on one of their lands, because if they draw any land like a Ghost Quarter, they have 5 mana, they can crack the Oblivion Stone, and then we lose both of our Spreading Seas. With an Oblivion Stone on board, you always want to keep Spreading Seas in hand, so that once they crack it, you can reestablish a Spreading Seas and keep them up Tron mana. Another option is to attack with a Mutavault and then leave up mana for Trickster to end step pressure. So if they go for something like if they find another mine and play it, and then they play Ugin, kill the Lord, we could flash in a Trickster and hopefully kill the Ugin on the following turn. But I think Silvergill is the correct play here. If they do slam Ugin, it could wipe the board. But Silvergill's going to draw us into important effects like Spell Pierce and Deprive. Okay. So I drew a Phantasmal Image. Let's go ahead and activate that Mutavault and get in for 5. We're following our plan pretty closely so far, keeping the opponent off of Tron and pushing early pressure in the first, 3, 4, 5 turns. I should pause and talk about Phantasmal Image for a moment here. It's both amazing and terrible in this matchup. Terrible because the opponent has access to Walking Ballista, which is a house against this card, obviously. If it just activates a single time, it can just blow up any Phantasmal Images that we have. So it's a bit scary playing Phantasmal Images against a deck that runs Walking Ballista. On the other hand, it's incredible because it can copy things like Worm Coil, it can copy Ulamog, even though it doesn't get the cast trigger, it can copy Thragtusk. So if we look at my sideboard, which I apologize for having not done that already in this video. Well, this is interesting. I actually didn't bring in Cliques. Clique is a card that should come in against this deck, and I think I was a little bit lazy and just didn't sideboard it in. So let's see. What I took out was 4 Master of Waves. Again, very weak to Walking Ballista, and it's a huge blowout to play a 4-drop and lose it to Walking Ballista. Similarly, Phantasmal Image is weak to Walking Ballista, so we took out 3 of those because I wanted to bring in 7 cards. 4 of them are certainly my Deprives, and if I can remember, the other 3 cards, let's see, would be Venser, Echoing Truth, and what else? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Got 4 Deprives, 1 Venser, 1 Echoing Truth. I've got these 3 guys here. Interesting. Oh, you know what? I'm showing you guys. I just did the deck tech, the recent deck tech. So I believe I still had 2 Vensers in the list at this point. So I think I brought in 2 Vensers, the Deprives, and an Echoing Truth. So something like that. Clique should be in. It's just straight up mistake on my part. So with this current list, I guess I still need to work on my sideboard strategy against Tron. Moving forward, I think I'd probably want to keep in 2 Phantasmal Images if I can find the space for it. Just because copying like a Worm Coil or a Thragtusk can be really, really good because you get sort of enter the battlefield value like no matter what, kind of, because Thragtusk, you're gaining life. You're getting a token when it leaves. Wormcoil, you're getting 2 tokens when it leaves. So anyhow, just wanted to show you guys the rough sideboarding strategy there. Opponent does not have another mine, but they do have the 5th land to be able to activate Oblivion Stone. So things kind of teetering on the edge right now. Drew an AEther Vial. That's kind of air. It's not super helpful immediately. And I'm going to go straight to combat. See what the opponent does here. Because we do have a Spreading Seas that we can put on one of their lands if they kill our creatures here. So we get in for 5. The opponent takes it. And again, the reason being that if they killed our creatures and our Spreading Seas with the Oblivion Stone, we could then reestablish Spreading Seas in second main and hopefully continue to keep them off of Tron. We've got 2 Mutavaults, which is a 2-turn clock even if they wipe our board. So we're not in the worst situation here, despite the Oblivion Stone and despite the opponent being perilously close to Tron mana. Once they activate the Oblivion Stone, they will have Tron mana. I think the only play here is basically get the island down and pass the turn. So the opponent cracks. They get to draw a card from the Chromatic Star. They now have access to a lot of mana. We don't have any counter spells in hand. Okay, so Wormcoil Engine. Feel like we dodged a bit of a bullet. 4 mana, what are they doing? So Walking Ballista, though, is an unfortunate follow-up to the Wormcoil because I was getting excited that I could play the Phantasmal Image and copy the Wormcoil Engine. It's still okay, even if it gets targeted by Ballista, I get my 2 tokens. But it's not nearly as good with the Ballista on the board, I think, because that's just huge value for a single ping he gets to blow up the Phantasmal Image. So I do get to use my mana for something this turn cycle. I'll get 1 Trickster in and tap this Wormcoil. So I do have some good cards in hand. That Oblivion Stone is off the table. Echoing Truth is another super versatile card. The potential lines are getting really, really confusing at this point, given all the options that I have. I think the most obvious thing is just to put a Spreading Seas onto one of the opponent's lands. Now, it's previously on mine, but if they don't have a redundant tower, I usually like to go after the tower. So I think the turn will probably start with Spreading Seasing their tower and just see what I draw, see if it will affect what I do for the rest of the turn. Now, another land would have been good because we're stuck with a bunch of 2-drops and only 5 lands. Well, so when the opponent played the Walking Ballista, it seemed much more threatening because they had tons of mana to pump into it. Now it seems a bit less so because I just took them off Tron. So I'm going to attack here. I'm sitting at 20 life. Not really afraid of my own life total. I doubt they would block in this situation because all you Merfolk pilots know that one of the easiest ways to take control over a game against Merfolk, especially with an anemic board like mine right now, is just untap with Walking Ballista. If you can kill one of our guys and pump Ballista back up, you can just sit back and control the game with Walking Ballista. So I'm going to attack, presuming the opponent's just going to take it. But they put the Ballista in front of it, which was very strange to me, potentially pointing at them having another Ballista in hand. Like, why would they throw that one away? I guess they want to keep my board clear. They assume they're going to be able to just attack and gain a bunch of life. So I'm going to leave up Trickster and Deprive here, showing what an amazing addition Trickster has been to the deck. Lets us pass the turn comfortably with instant speed, effects up. But before we pass, let's get the AEther Vial down. Opponent's going to go straight to combat, and even though it's a little bit scary that they can slam something in the second main phase, we really want to prevent the opponent from gaining life. So let's go ahead and play the Trickster, tap the Wormcoil. As you can see, we've got 6 power on board now. If we untap and draw a land, we can just Play the Lord, activate both Mutavaults, and swing for 9. Okay, so not only does the opponent have a land, they have the exact Tron piece that they need. And now they've got sort of infinite mana. And it's Ugin the Spirit Dragon. So what have we seen so far this game? We've seen Oblivion Stone, Walking Ballista, Wormcoil, and Ugin. So they could Ugin could -2 and wipe the Spreading Seas from the board, but I guess since he has an extra tower, he feels like the Spreading Seas is not really doing anything, especially since I don't have any Island Walk Lords. So he just decides to plus. And really, racing to Ugin's ultimate is pretty powerful. It's really, really hard to beat Tron if they get to ultimate with Ugin. So he's just lightning bolting my Trickster. Pretty rough. And he follows up with an Oblivion Stone. Why not? For good measure. So with that Ballista off the table now, the Phantasmal Image copying the Wormcoil is sort of back on the table as an option. Get to take this Vial up. It's weaker now because of the Oblivion Stone. Spell Pierce is interesting. As I mentioned last turn, we really would have liked a land to be able to play 2 spells and hold up Deprive. Echoing Truth is kind of a combo with Deprive. If you bounce the Ugin, you get to counter it on the way down. Again, same thing with all of these other really threatening cards. So the most obvious line here is just to start by Phantasmal Imaging their Wormcoil. Now this is a really, really good play in this spot because if Ugin targets the Wormcoil, I still get 2 tokens. Navigating around this Oblivion Stone might be tricky. If they blow this up, we're both going to get tokens. You know, one positive of the opponent's last turn for me, you know, they slammed Ugin and they slammed O-Stone, which seems like, you know, we're basically toast. But it's a bit subtle. They didn't have mana left up to activate Oblivion Stone the turn it came down and put a fate counter on one of their big permanents. Which means if I can effectively pressure their life total next turn when they untap, they're not going to be able to save any of their permanents with fate counters. They're just going to have to crack the Oblivion Stone. So that becomes my plan at this point is, how do I maneuver into an attack that forces the opponent to crack this Oblivion Stone and kill his Ugin? So I've got a Vial on board, and I've got an Island Walk Lord. So Wormcoil Engine is 6 power by itself. And we'd really like to prevent the Wormcoil Engine from gaining them life, because even with the Island Walk Lord, we're only going to have 3, 3, and 6, which is only 12. And if the opponent swings with their Wormcoil, they're going to be at 14. So outside of lethal. So I think we just pass here, leaving up Deprive. Okay, opponent's going to start their turn by cycling a Horizon Canopy. Okay, so they go for Thragtusk here, and again, I'm really trying to avoid the opponent gaining life. I don't know if they're going to attack with the Wormcoil yet, but Thragtusk will certainly gain them some life and make things a bit harder to deal with. So I'm just going to counter this. There's really, with 1 card in hand, I don't imagine the opponent has much more of value to cast. So let's use our Deprive in the best possible way. So the opponent bolted my face with Ugin. It's really interesting because if they bolted my Wormcoil, I would get 2 tokens. And again, if the opponent attacks with Wormcoil, they go up to 14. And there's no way I can have lethal next turn, unless I slam 2 Lords. Let's note that after casting Thragtusk, the opponent has mana to activate Oblivion Stone still. But again, they can't do fate counters and crack it. So I'm expecting an attack here, but we don't get one. So, okay. We're sort of in this. We just need to be able to threaten Ugin here. No, I'm sorry, threaten the opponent's life total so that they're forced to crack the Oblivion Stone and kill the Ugin. So we are going to take AEther Vial up. This is a very strange situation here. So Trickster was a really, really, really good draw here because we needed a way to deal effectively with this Wormcoil. before we drew the Trickster, we could have vialed in the Lord, activated the Mutavault, but that wouldn't have been enough for lethal because the Mutavaults would only be 3 and 3. The opponent would go down to 2. Furthermore, if I attack with the Mutavaults, with the Lord, the opponent can crack the Oblivion Stone in response. Yeah, they would lose their Ugin, but they would get 2 tokens from the Wormcoil engine, which they could use to block and eat my 2 Mutavaults. And as I mentioned, Mutavaults are excellent because they can dodge all this sorcery speed garbage like Ugin and Oblivion Stone. Oblivion Stone, not sorcery speed, but it just can't hit lands. So getting my Mutavaults eaten by Wormcoil tokens seems terrible. So the Lord by himself was not really getting the job done here. I do have an Echoing Truth. So let's say that I play my land, bounce Wormcoil Engine. In response to attempting to bounce the Wormcoil Engine, the opponent could crack Oblivion Stone. We would all get Summoning Sick tokens. And then, if I had used an island and a Mutavault, I could then play my Lord out. I could then play the Lord with island. Don't have any attacks this turn, but that could be a winning line. Let's say that I bounce the opponent, winning like a couple turns from now, because the opponent, if I bounce the Wormcoil Engine, if they don't respond to it, that means the Wormcoil gets bounced, and the opponent is forced. Let's see, I'll just activate 1 Mutavault, present lethal with 2 and 6. The opponent will crack the Oblivion Stone because they're dead, otherwise they lose their Ugin. I'll get tokens for the Wormcoil Engine. The opponent will then replay their Wormcoil Engine, but I'll lose my Spreading Seas. So things would get tricky. This Trickster, on the other hand, though, really sort of smooths things out because I can vial in the Trickster right now. If the opponent doesn't respond immediately to Trickster and lets his ability resolve, this Wormcoil gets shut off, which means that even if the opponent activates Oblivion Stone, he's not going to get any tokens from his Wormcoil. So let's assume that he's aware of that. I vial in Trickster, and he responds by cracking the Oblivion Stone. We would all get tokens. The opponent would lose his Ugin, would lose his Oblivion Stone, obviously. And I'd lose my Spreading Seas. So that's all in response to bringing in the Trickster. I would, of course, lose my Trickster as well. But that would leave me with all my mana to start developing. I could Echoing Truth the opponent's Wormcoil Engine tokens. I could play a Lord. I'd be in a pretty good situation there. So, let's say that I bring in Trickster, though, and they don't respond. I think that might be game because, well, maybe not this turn, but that would be really bad for the opponent. So I think what I actually did was I miscalculated with Vial and lands. The reason I was saying I would Vial in Trickster would be that once the opponent cracks the Oblivion Stone, excuse me, I need a sip of water. Once the opponent cracks the Oblivion Stone, I'm going to lose my Vial. So if I Vial in Trickster, and they're sort of forced in to respond, and I want my mana left to redevelop afterwards. If I just cast Trickster, I guess my thought during the game was then I go to combat, I could Vial in my Lord, whatever, but I lost sight of the fact that Vial is going to become far less useful once Oblivion Stone goes on the stack. So as you'll see, I actually just hard cast Trickster here, which was a misstep, but I don't think it's like kind of a losing misstep. I think things are still sort of workable here. So the thing that's not workable is that the opponent didn't respond to Trickster by blowing up the world. I think they realized they navigated into a situation where they may have to lose their Ugin. And as such, they were reluctant to activate this Oblivion Stone. Immediately after they let me tap their Wormcoil, I think they probably realized that they were facing down a lethal threat here. So I've got 8 damage coming at the opponent. They realize they're going to die, so it's time to crack the Oblivion Stone. So I'm getting a really, really good deal here. Opponent loses a Board Wipe and Ugin and a Wormcoil. I'm only losing a Trickster, a Spreading Seas, and an AEther Vial. And I'm going to be left with 2 Wormcoil tokens. The opponent's going to take some damage from this Mutavault. And, you know, I've got Spell Pierce up if it comes in useful. Presenting definitely lethal damage. The opponent's on 2 cards. Well, let's start with Expedition Map. That's kind of air, right? Well, they crack it right away. A Sanctum of Ugin makes me think, okay, they've got something big in their hand. All right, so what's happening here? What are they doing with all this mana? Wow, okay, so they have another Ugin in hand, and casting it triggers Sanctum of Ugin. Now, they're facing down lethal. Even if Ugin bolts one of our guys here, we're going to be able to activate both Mutavaults, come in for 7 next turn. So this means they're probably going to get a Walking Ballista, but they have no mana. They only have 3. They can make a 1/1. So they played their land this turn with Sanctum of Ugin. What I should have done in this spot is Spell Pierce the Ugin. That would mean they have to pay for Spell Pierce. Ugin would resolve, you kill one of my guys, and then I win with 7. Because they couldn't also pay for Spell Pierce and cast a Walking Ballista. However, I let it resolve. It was a strict misplay. This is a really, really excellent example of how Spell Pierce can have value later on in a game. If I were to counter the Ugin, I would have won the game on the spot, even though Ugin would resolve. So Ugin resolved, he gets to kill my guy. The opponent gets the best of both worlds. He gets to cast his Ballista and resolve Ugin. So again, strict misplay on my part. But I think I navigated the game closely enough. Earlier Phantasmal play on the Wormcoil and the Trickster play. Everything's been pretty good. I was fortunate to draw the Echoing Truth right then and there to bounce this Walking Ballista, because now I can just activate both Mutavaults and game is over. So, yeah, the opponent said he played poorly. I didn't play super optimally, and I noticed a couple of my missteps even during the match. But as I was saying earlier, the lines get really complicated on our side of the table. On their side of the table, they just slam big stuff, I think. Our side of the table, I had to choose whether to Spell Pierce when they had mana up. I had to choose whether to Vial when they had the Oblivion Stone up. We managed to get through it. I think this might be the most stuff I've ever faced from Tron and come out ahead. If we count up, you know, what we managed to take down, we'll see. Let's see. We want to just go to the graveyard, I guess, here, right? And so there's a Walking Ballista in his hand. So it's 1 Walking Ballista, 2 Walking Ballistas. There's an Ugin in here and an Ugin here. So there's 2 Walking Ballistas, 2 Ugins, 2 Oblivion Stones, I think. Let's see. There's 1 Oblivion Stone and 2 Oblivion Stones. All right, so we had 2 Ballistas, 2 Ugins, 2 Oblivion Stones, a Thrag Tusk. I feel like I might be forgetting something, but yeah. Anyhow, just a lot of stuff. And if we look at what we had, you know, little guys, tricksters, phantasmal images, able to scrap together a pretty epic win against Mono Green Tron. So let me know your guys' thoughts. I found it really entertaining, so I thought you guys would enjoy it as well. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my Patreon page if you haven't already. Thanks again so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.